Mrs. Wilson knew very well in her heart that the Wilson Group is now in a mess. If it really depends on the specific situation, no one will invest. How to vote? It is useless to invest tens of millions in the Wilson Group. After Emgrand Group does not cooperate with the Wilson Group, everyone does not wait to see the Wilson Group going down. And what the Wilson Group does is the decoration project itself. This kind of business requires other people to work for them. If no one wants to work, it can only be idle. Therefore, normally, no one will invest in the Wilson Group, unless there is a fool who has no money to spend. Fredman Wilson was extremely shrewd at first glance, and he would never be willing to help in vain. Unless there is sufficient return, it is possible for him to pay out. The old Mrs. Wilson thought for a moment and said to Fredman Wilson, "Fredman, let's do this. You have just come to Orus Hill. We are a family. Your father and my husband also have connections. We should understand more and communicate more. How long do you think you can stay at our home?" Fredman Wilson thought, and hurriedly asked, "Well, I'm an outsider, it is not convenient to live at your home?" After all, Miss Wendy has not yet left the cabinet. In fact, an old fox like Fredman Wilson knows his motives very well, so his speech is also very technical. If he asked directly whether Wendy lived here, he would immediately appear what he really is. This is not what he wants. If he changes the way and asks her if she live here, will it affect Wendy? That would be very technical. If Lady Wilson said, "Don't worry, if Wendy doesn't live here, it won't have any impact," then she just politely refused. If the Lady Wilson says, "You can rest assured that they are all from your own family and will not have any influence on Wendy," then it proves that Wendy also lives here, and she agrees. The old Mrs. Wilson is also a good person. How can she not know Fredman Wilson's motive? The reason she invited him to stay at home for a few days was to persuade Wendy and let her find a chance to get closer to Fredman Wilson. Her wishful thinking is very good because then, Fredman Wilson will definitely be able to invest in the Wilson family. After all, Fredman Wilson is the chairman of a listed group. If he invests in the Wilson family, it will not only solve the money problem but also bring a strong enough background to the Wilson family. At that time, the Wilson family will be able to come back to life and create glory again. So she smiled and said, "Don't worry, Fredman Wilson, Wendy is a very sensible girl. She must also welcome Fredman Wilson to live at home. Besides, although our house is a bit old, it's a single-family villa. You live here, outsiders will not know." Fredman Wilson immediately relaxed, nodded, and said, "Then I will be more respectful than my fate. I just have some business to talk about in Orus Hill these days. By the way, I can get to know you more and then consider whether to invest in your business." "Okay." Old Mrs. Wilson smiled excitedly, "That's great. I'll let someone go and clean up the guest room." While talking, Mrs. Wilson lowered her voice and said, "Fredman, to tell you the truth, the guest room is opposite Wendy's room. If you have any needs, you can find her." Fredman Wilson was extremely excited. "Okay." This Lady Wilson really took the road. Although he has money and no shortage of women, it can easily be known by his wife if he messes around outside. However, if he lives in Wilson's house, if he can get along with Wendy, then he definitely doesn't have to worry that his wife will know. After all, in her eyes, this is his own family. He is here to fulfill his father's last wish, so she will definitely not doubt it. This is definitely a great choice for stealing fish. Wendy was slapped by the Lady Wilson and ran out, but before she ran out of the yard, she was stopped by Noah Wilson. Noah Wilson persuaded her to come back, but she couldn't follow her life and death. She always felt that she had fallen into this field. The great responsibility lies with Mrs. Wilson. If it weren't for her, how could she be so miserable? So, she was angry for a while, wishing to run away from home, the farther the better. But her father's words still let her dispel the idea. Noah Wilson said earnestly, "Wendy, where are you going to run away from home? You don't even have a job, and there is no place to live outside. You are a girl, so you can't go out to rent a house and work at this time, right? Your grandma did something wrong, but what else can we do now besides sticking to your grandma? After all, she is the head of the Wilson family." Wendy was silent for a moment, thinking about her father's words repeatedly. If she leaves the Wilson family, she really has nowhere to go. She can't wander the streets, right? After all, she is the second young lady of the Wilson family in the eyes of others. If she wanders on the street, wouldn't she be laughed at? So she could only say aggrieved, "Dad, Grandma is too domineering and authoritarian, or let's move out." Noah Wilson sighed and said, "Move out? Now, if you move out, there will be nothing left. Your grandma can live for a few years at most? When she passes away, this villa and some other assets of the Wilson family will belong to our family. This is our house. If we move out and your second uncle and his family come back, what should we do? Then there will be nothing?"